don't think there's anyone who hasn't been ridiculed at some point in their life. It's one of the most common ways that people worldwide are complete asshats. But why do we ridicule? And more importantly, ridicule and bullying can lead to severe self-esteem issues. How do we help people who have to deal with that? There's a great website called the It Gets Better Project that aims to communicate to LGBT youth that it gets better. And they're absolutely right. The transition to adulthood can be tough, and not only for LGBT youth, but it does get better. The one thing no one ever seems to talk about is why. So I'm gonna tell you, with social theory. Before I start, I should probably explain why I called this video the wonders and blunders of ridicule. Sure, ridicule today is problematic pretty much all the time, but that doesn't mean it was always that way. Truth is, ridicule looks like it was beneficial to our species at some point in the past. It's one of those psychological universals. Practically everyone across all sorts of cultures does it. We can't help ourselves. We just love cruelly poking fun at other people. So understanding why might help us tackle this demon most foul. But just like vampires and Andy Serkis, ridicule has many forms. It can be used to maintain and reinforce cultural values or to establish power relationships. And while there are certain examples where vampire cultural values are good and a power relationship with Andy Serkis is ideal, that's not always the case. So the story goes like this. Back in the day, long before the internet or airplanes, humankind lived in small groups of people who liked to hunt animals and gather food. In a prime example of science being super accurate, we decided to call them hunter-gatherers. A group of humans are stronger than the sum of their parts, so the people in these groups had to cooperate. Disorganized groups would have been outcompeted by organized ones, and would have probably all died off. Social cohesion was key back then, and as you can imagine, anything to create that cohesion was beneficial. Even ridicule. Our cultural values tell us what behavior is acceptable and what isn't, and through weeding out that inappropriate behavior, we maintain social cohesion. So when some people don't live up to our cultural expectations, we ridicule them. For example, where I come from, we ridicule people who fart. We might accuse them of crapping their pants or call them smelly gas monsters. We insult them to add a consequence to this undesired behavior in the hopes that this consequence will be sufficient to, and forgive the pun, put an end to it. No one wants their nostrils stuffed with someone else's stinky butt gas. Now kids obviously don't stop farting after just being told not to. That's not a strong enough consequence. But through ridicule and embarrassment, some kids learn to shut their butts up around the noses of others. Ridicule is unfortunately one of the easiest and most effective tools we possess to enforce social rules, and thus make groups more cohesive. Sure, you can say that farting in public doesn't really affect the fitness of a group, and you'd be right, but culture is a very complex thing, and farting is a fun example. So what does this mean for bullied youth? Well, look at homophobia, or transphobia, or racism. These are all antiquated cultural values that people still hold on to, and while we're finally having the conversation why it's wrong to hold on to them, they still exist. But now you know why they exist. And in that, you should know why they shouldn't anymore. You're like halfway through this video, and you've already got all the evidence you need to know why you can't listen to these people. So don't. Society tosses bags filled with expectations at youth. And when you get older, you get freedom from that. You can do what you want, you can be who you are, and you don't have to dodge so many bags. But that's not all. A consequence of social cohesion is that you need to rationalize why you belong to your group and not other groups. Back in the hunter-gatherer days, the group you belong to is safe. Other groups are unpredictable. They might not be dangerous, but you don't know for sure, so you play it safe and assume they are. This legacy of understanding us and them lives in us today, although group dynamics have become a little bit more complicated. You probably belong to a number of groups. Your religion, your sexual preference, your culture, your country, your friends that you play Magic the Gathering with every Sunday. These are what we call in-groups. Out-groups are everything outside that. Other religions, other cultures. Those nerds who play Dungeons and Dragons. Because we still unconsciously separate us from them, we retain the tendency to be friendly with our in-groups and wary of out-groups. We ridicule out-groups because it reinforces our decision to be part of our in-groups. Someone might say, I play Magic the Gathering because Dungeons and Dragons is for nerds, and I'm not a nerd. Or even worse, that Christianity is better than Islam because terrorists like ISIS and the Taliban are Muslims. Our unconscious tendency to create this in and out group dichotomy is at the heart of all the prejudice in the world. I think the great philosopher and Jedi Master, Yoda, explains this better than I ever could.
Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering.
In and out groups can be on a huge scale, like national identity, but they can also be small, like friend groups in high school. The pretty people may associate with other pretty people because they hold that value. The hardest don't give a frig people probably prefer to hang out with people who don't give any frigs. And if you're not them, they might ridicule you. It's a conflict of values, but that doesn't mean that your values are wrong or you're just not good enough. This too gets better when you hit adulthood, and again, it comes down to freedom. You're not forced to associate with anyone you don't want to. In high school, you've got to see these people every day, but when you're out, you're out. But that still doesn't explain why friends ridicule friends. They're part of the same peer in-group. The answer to this question lies in how ridicule does more than just promote social cohesion. It's a means of establishing power within a group. Just like how in-groups put down out-groups to reinforce their own ideology, bullies put down others to reinforce their social power. Making others seem worse than what they are makes you seem relatively better. And when you hit adulthood, this gets better too, but for a bit of a different reason. There aren't any truly enforceable consequences to bullying when you're a youth, and it sucks. But when you become an adult, people have to hold jobs. And you're not going to keep a job if you keep calling your coworkers douche nozzles. We don't need to be as socially cohesive as the hunter-gatherers, but we do need to be socially cohesive enough for society to function. And this weeds out the bullies. Ultimately, adulthood gives you the freedom to choose how you want to enrich your life. You might play Magic the Gathering with friends every Sunday, or find a sick old group of people to play Dungeons & Dragons with. You might become friends with your coworkers, or the people in your university dorm. Adulthood removes the chains of high school peer groups and stops people from putting you down. And that's why it gets better. So don't forget. And we're back. It's been a long and thoroughly annoying hiatus, but I'm back and I'm going to have a video every week. Also, feel free to email or tweet me. I like hearing from other people. And as always, subscribe. You might just learn something.